Yes, thanks again, Mary, for joining us today.
Mhm.
I don't want to spend too much time. I mean, you can also obviously say things about yourself that you want us to know.
Mhm.
Obviously, you are an actress who has starred in Star Trek Discovery, which is what led us to meet, and
Mhm.
for me to be able to invite you on here. And well, I'm gonna give a long biography, but
Great.
you're born into a family of actors. Your mother
Mhm.
is Beth Grant, your father is
Mhm.
Michael Chieffo, and you went to the prestigious Juilliard School.
I did.
So you have classic training in acting. You've done a lot of Shakespeare and other stage work as well. So we can get to that towards the end of this conversation too. I think Star Trek is the most well-known, biggest project you have done so far. And yeah, and we hope to talk to you about being on Star Trek, being in science fiction, obviously what it's like to be a Klingon, and but even more importantly, what it's like to be a woman in the television and film industry.
Mhm.
So and obviously this, I mean, I'm trying to have this as a conversation between us, but obviously people don't want to hear me talk, they want to hear your talk. So whenever you have like want to launch into a long anecdote, please do so. Any exciting projects you want to tell us about that you've done in
Mhm.
the past, that you have coming up now, anything really. And so yeah, the floor is also completely yours.
Thank
uh,
you.
I try to avoid trying to ask questions. I mean, most of the questions I have on here got sent in by people
Mhm.
on this conversation, but I try to avoid the more standard, basic questions you
Yeah.
get a lot at conventions,
Mhm.
um, at least for now. But however, to kind of get into this, one of
Yeah.
the questions you get asked all the time as well: what does it feel like? How does it feel to be part of such a large franchise that is so
Mhm.
be in this legacy and have this massive fan base everywhere?
Well, I love that that's the first question, and also yes, just to say thank you to you for inviting me. I've been so grateful. This actually ties into the question because we met at a convention. What is it? Over 2 years now.
It's over 2 years ago now, yeah.
Yeah. Wild. But I remember that particular convention so distinctly because that was, official Star Trek one, and I met you and Marika and so many other brilliant, intelligent women who were so passionate about the show, from another country that I had never been to. And I remember we chatted initially. I think you came over to my booth and you told me about all that you were working on, and I was thrilled by that. And then, as the day or whatever, there was an opportunity for you guys to just come over and chat some more, and we all just ended up geeking out together about literature and Star Trek and everything in between. And for me, that ties in so much to, what does it feel like? What does it mean to be a part of this large franchise, this entity? It really is about ultimately the human connections that I get to make as a consequence. The work I get to do on set is obviously thrilling, and as an actor, it's just any opportunity to act is received with open arms, and particularly with a character I cared about and that was challenging. And well, I'm sure we'll get more into all of that later. But for me, when I really get the sense of what it is to be a part of the actual franchise and the larger impact, it's moments like that where I get to make connections with like-minded and differently minded people, that I really get to have conversations, intelligent conversations with people from around the world and around my country. It's as we see more and more, the United States has a lot of different types of people and places and things. And I've had the opportunity to go to smaller conventions around the country and get to meet people. I grew up in LA and was in school in New York, and then I was filming in Toronto. I've been in a lot of metropolitan areas. So to get to be more with people in Middle America has been really wonderful. And my mom's from the South and my dad's from Long Island. So I've just really been grateful to get in touch with people from everywhere as a consequence of the show, and to see how much it really affects them, whether it be just Discovery or every show that's existed in Star Trek canon. It runs the gamut. And I decided to watch a lot of the episodes myself. I really get to chat with people about the franchise as a whole. So that's really fun and engaging.
And as of today, there's going to be yet another show, apparently now centered on Pike, Spock, in the iterations that we met them in Discovery. So
yeah,
obviously, we hope for you to come back.
Here's to hoping.
We're going to petition CBS again.
Great. All about it.
The second question that was asked, and I know that is a question that is always also interesting to me, but it came from somebody else. It was, were you nervous or excited about working with people like Jason Isaacs, or Michelle Yeoh, or anybody else? Also because of all of this, and I happen to know that you're a big fan of Harry Potter, so
yes. I'm really glad that this question came up, because I do have a really great anecdote for both of those amazing humans and artists, specifically because, my first story really with Jason is that he was cast because we had done the first 2 episodes before the main disco crew had come in. And I'd been, in Klingon land and really just basically getting to know Shazad really well. And, but once it was announced that he was going to be the captain, we were super excited. And, but I didn't have any scenes with him until episode 5. And it was my first scene where I spoke English, and there was just like a lot of stuff, and I was torturing him, and I remember getting that script and being like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna torture Lucius Malfoy. And he was always, very lovely in the moments that we met at reading, like for the table read of episode 4, where it was all of that Klingon, all those Klingon scenes between me and Voke. I remember being at the read and we were doing it in Klingon, and Jason was like, oh my, like he couldn't get over it. And he's like filming us, and he came to the Klingon set. So I knew that he was like, excited, and he wasn't, a big meanie. But at the same time, I was getting to act with someone whose work I really respected. And for me, when I do get the opportunity to collaborate with someone I respect, I want to show up and do my best work. Like it's just, I just want him to think that I'm a committed actor and that I'll, and so the day came, and the joke on the prosthetic side was like, once we got into that torture chamber, it was also like one of the first hot days in like June or something. And so I was sweating, and I remember James McKinnon was like, why is she sweating so much? And Hugo, who's also on prosthetic team, was like, I think it's because she's nervous about acting with Jason. And but I pulled through, and it was really fun. We ultimately had a great time, and it was fun working on when I have to like backhand for it too. I mean, like I didn't, it was still a stage smack, but he was like, no, really give it to me, And so that was good. And then we have the like subsequent fight sequence where they escape. And so we had filmed that. And the very last shot we filmed of that day was when I'm on my back and I've just been blasted and I have the scar. So it's literally me on my back just going, "Aah!" And so the Shazad and Jason were wrapped before me. And so I'm just laying there waiting for them to set up the shot. And in this armor, I can't move. And Jason came over as he was leaving and went, very nice work today. And then he left. And I was just like, I did it. He likes me. And it is true. And we ended up, there was, we had a smaller cast dinner a few nights later. And ever since then, we've just been able to be good allies and friends, and I've always felt a genuine love and respect mutually, and that's been just a thrill. And then with Michelle, I did meet her early on because she was in the pilot, but we didn't interact. But she is one of those people that is just so lovely and graceful and kind from the get-go. And because I didn't interact with her, I was like, oh, well, you know, she doesn't. And then I remember when she did start coming back, she was in the trailer, and it was after my revealing scene. And someone had a picture of like me in the full thing, and they're like, Michelle, look at this. And I remember her being like, oh my God, that's incredible. And she got so excited. And I was like, oh my God, Michelle Yeoh's getting excited about my naked Klingon. And then ultimately, I remember I was actually at the season 1 premiere at the after party, and I got an email from our second AD saying, hey, Mary, we're going to need you to fly in Toronto, whatever, Tuesday or whatever, a few days early because Michelle Yeoh's going to beat you up in the finale. And I was like, what? And I like ran over to her. I'm like, Michelle, you're going to beat me up. I'm so excited. It's such an honor. And she was like, oh, great. And, you know, we had the fight rehearsal, and she is such an incredible pro with everything, but particularly with, I mean, she would take in the choreography that they gave and then be like, well, what if I do a little, you know, and everyone's like, yeah, no, that seems really good. And for me, I was mainly getting beaten up by her, but I was just like, anything, like, let me know. And she was very complimentary and respectful, saying like, you know, if you don't take the hit, it makes me look bad, and you're really taking him. And like, it was a genuine, you know, conversation physically. And it was ultimately really fun. And there's a part where I kind of like growled at her that wasn't scripted, and I kind of spit on her, and she really took it in. And so that was really thrilling. And then since then, you know, I did get to interact with her again in the second season, which was fun. And but both of them are, you know, such genuine professionals that are about the work. And so I'm so grateful that I've been able to interact with known actors who are genuine artists and actors, not just like, look at me. They really hunker down and do the work.
And I mean, if you want to get beaten up by anybody, it must be Michelle Yeoh.
Yeah, pretty much.
And yeah, so obviously we have to talk about the fact that you're not playing a human, you're playing a Klingon. And I got a question about kind of the challenge of playing a Klingon, but not so much the prosthetics and the language and all of this. Obviously you can talk about this as well, because it's a very popular question.
Mm-hmm.
But, what is it like to kind of step into this another kind of legacy of having this whole race established within this franchise and having gone through so many iterations of it? Like, is it in any way comparable to, for instance, Ethan Peck, who suddenly has to Spock? But, and I mean, you have your own character to fill in and create, but at the same time, you have to have these big footsteps, quite literally. So how did you approach this? Did you take inspiration from other Klingons that came before you, also especially female?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the angle of that question as well, because there's the prosthetics and the teeth and the language and all of that, which definitely obviously informs character. But I'm a research gal. There's a reason we all bonded in Dortmund. I to watch all the Klingon-centric episodes throughout all the series, because there's a great list online on the Wiki page. So I really did want to get to know, even though I knew most of those series were taking place post Discovery, I still wanted to be informed as to how they were portrayed, so that I knew whatever we were doing was informed by that. And so I did have a particular eye on the female characters as well, and particularly what stood out to me was both how they were sexualized, and also how, particularly I always talk about Grilka in Deep Space Nine, how the whole premise of that first episode with her is that she can't succeed her husband's house because she's a woman. And obviously, I've got an eye on on feminist themes in art, and that really stuck out to me. just in the sense of, okay, that's the kind of society that Laurel is living in. And in fact, she's coming from that all over 100 years prior to Grilka's journey. So I was like, if that's what it is, post-Praxis explosion, post, being a little bit more friendly with the Federation, what is it like during Laurel's time? And particularly since I was playing a commander, which is not a typical position for a woman, in the Klingon Empire. We see them here and there on the bridge, but never illuminated too much, except for a few exceptions. And then, of course, the Duras sisters, that's a whole other interesting exploration of a similar theme of, like, these women can't have the power that they should, if they were men, they wouldn't have to try and achieve success and power in the same way that they end up doing. And so I did keep an eye on all of those characters. And I obviously don't, I think we'll address this a little later too. It's like the amount of power I have as an actor when it comes to what's actually being written is very minimal, but energetically, how I convey this character can inform the story, and it ultimately I think did. And I found that Laurel's arc in the first season paralleled Grilka's in many ways, in that Grilka tries to get Quark to help her, and Laurel keeps investing in these men that keep dying and or disappearing or whatever, and then ultimately she has to accept her own power. So I was really excited that ended up being the journey for her. And I do like to think that also more on the technical, physical side, I did take a lot of time with the dialect once I did speak English in that scene, what it would be like for her as someone who speaks English fluently, but it's not her first language. She still is used to making different sounds. I did reference the Klingon dictionary a lot in the sounds, like there's one sound for each vowel. So I really wanted to have most of those vowel sounds be, as the series progressed and as she got more exposed to more humans, I let it ease up a bit. But I initially really wanted to focus on a Klingon who has basically not interacted with humans for 100 years. I mean, she certainly hasn't, but there hasn't been much exposure. So I really wanted to lean on that. And then, of course, though, keeping what I think we see across all Klingons is the majesty. And while we do see the brutality, there is, it is an honor culture. At least they're striving for that. Whether they achieve it all the time is another story entirely. But I really did want to have that inform it. And I'm sure a lot of that came from what I ended up dealing with as well with the actors of previous series. Your costume and your makeup kind of mandates it. I really have to be regal because my outfit will not bend. But yeah.
And I mean, it is interesting, or it has been interesting to me watching Discovery, that they also really lean into more exploration of what it's like to be a woman in society. I mean,
yeah,
you have like Cole and then Cole Shaw and patriarchs, and they're horrible.
Yeah.
And I mean, they just want to hold her back and hold her down. And she also really uses her femininity and then her role as a mother later on as a political power play in a way. So that's really interesting. And because, I mean, the most of the Klingons we really get to know before in the franchise are male. So like somebody like William, and I mean, they'd use him to explore some themes of patriarchy as well, but like maybe less critically so than they've done on Discovery, I feel. So that was really interesting, certainly.
Yeah, I really felt that while it was taking stuff that had been more peripheral to the forefront, stuff that it totally tracked with what we had been exposed to, but it was, I agree, not the center focus of the story. So it was exciting to have this female Klingon be the center of a lot of the Klingon stories in the first two seasons.
So kind of obviously the Klingons, it's been sort of a touchy subject and some of the discourse around the new show.
Yeah.
look different now, and it's, it's different from what we're used to. And I mean, that's in a larger context of other
Yeah.
people. But how do you think, like, how did you, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, how did you
Yeah.
maybe also react when you first saw the new look,
Mm-hmm.
and how has your maybe also engagement with fans been on the new look? Because I mean, I certainly hope people weren't weird about it too much
I mean, yeah, I mean,
with all of this.
yeah. Well, it's interesting because I joined Twitter. I joined Twitter. Good morning. It's morning for me. I joined Twitter. I think basically, once I was cast, I was August of 2016 when I was cast, and we started filming in January of 2017. And so I remember getting a Twitter right once I was cast. I was like, okay, let's get ready, because I'm sure there will be an announcement. And then once the announcement came, which I believe was sometime in September, late September, I think, or October. That's what's incredible about this franchise is, like, automatically, once officially announced, I had new followers. I had people welcoming me to the family. All they knew was I was a Klingon. So I kind of, like I said, research gal, all this sort of stuff. Like, okay, I'm gonna be that. That is who I'm going to be in this community. I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna speak on what I know to be true with the Klingons. Of course, we didn't have the visual announcement. I remember there was one leak that happened, an unfortunate image that was like, it was not a, it was, everyone at the lunch break or something like that. And obviously that wasn't an ideal way for the first image to come out. But once the more official stuff that was well lit and you could see the nuance, I mean, how it was described to me, something we talked about a lot actually in rehearsals before the pilot, was part of the inspiration for Brian Fuller, because it was this image was seeded from him when he was still involved with the project, was to explore how alien this species can be, and overall how much can we flesh out this culture and let it be authentic and real. Like, the alien quality was to allow us to be a separate entity completely, not a human in an outfit. It was like, these are creatures that have a different belief system. They're an indigenous culture that legitimately does not want to be watered down by this federation that they've only heard not great things about, which we then see reverberations of in TOS with Day of the Dove, and like all about propaganda. Like, you see how the misinformation allows both sides to have wrong ideas about each other. So that was really what we were leaning towards when it came to how alien can they be. And then I know for Neville Page and Glenn Hetrick, when they were looking at the design, they obviously, as has been noted, they're Geiger fans when it came to an alien look. As Neville described it to me, there were sensors, that the idea that it was leaning on a reptilian sort of, the back of the head was where we had a lot of sensation. And what was funny was I kind of automatically started doing that. I did a lot of mask work in college, and literally in math class, you like look at yourself in the mirror and they're like, how do I move? And I kind of did that. And I also found, like, again, limited movement in the body with that initial armor. I was like, this is my way of communicating how I'm thinking. It's my eyes and my head tilts. So I remember noting that to Neville pretty early on. And he said, well, that's perfect, because that really is what we've imagined is going on with the Klingons. And so once I got that kind of like thumbs up, yeah, I feel like you could track when I got that, because when I'm in the jail cell, I'm all like, oh, yes, I understand what's happening. So for me, I really did enjoy leaning on the alien side, particularly in season 1. I felt that Laurel's journey fit that aesthetic. Like, it's hard to really describe. I think I wouldn't have been opposed if we stuck to a more TNG look. I think that would have worked as well. But I did appreciate the idea of letting them be a full entity. And I think that we often can fall into tropes with aliens where instead of actually being viewing them as an alien species, we're just making them an amalgamation of, like, you know, not great cultural stereotypes. And so I felt that making them more truly a distinct alien species kept us from leaning into stuff that could be not great. Because I mean, and we all know so much of what all the species were kind of developed based off of different cultures, and how do we embrace what came before but also be like, this is, you know, at the time 2017 and now 2020, like we can't do that. So I appreciated that. And then of course, but speaking to the shift then in season 2, I liked that Laurel's journey ended up having hair for the journey that she had. I thought that, you know, there's a divine feminine imagery that we really tried to evoke in the second season. I felt that Laurel was very sensual and feminine in the first season. And, you know, a lot of people say she's scary. And I'm sure as we dive more into the being a woman in this industry, I'll touch on this more, but how people view women who do not fit cultural norms. Definitely want to talk about that. But I did think that what Laurel was struggling with internally was reflected externally in just the dresses and the hair and her trying to find her way. And I definitely felt that she was more of a tomboy Klingon, whatever that means. And so this was not something that she was like, oh great, I finally get to wear pretty outfits. Like it was something that she was internally struggling with. She was just trying to fit what was expected of her. And I really appreciated that at the end of Point of Light, when she makes her mother speech, Gersha and I really talked about having her wear a more conservative dress, that, you know, she had a lot of cleavage going on in the copper dress, and that she ends up confining that because it was playing on, again, these archetypes and stereotypes that hopefully we can expand forward through. But with the Klingon Empire and everything, she decided, okay, I'm going to embody the matronly aesthetic right now. So I thought that was an interesting commentary. And yeah, but I will say my favorite look was probably that finale, the warrior. It was just the right balance of like femme warrior with the hair and the all that. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And I do have, all that being said, just coming back to the actual question about like, we're talking with fans about it. I do respect that it is like, is it a new show if the Klingons don't look different? Like, it's something that has followed the Klingons from the day one practically. And so I try and have a sense of humor about it. I don't get defensive. It's also like, again, I'm the actor, so I can't really do much, but I try and embrace what is given to me and do the best I can with it.
I just got a question and now I saw that for some reason I only saw half of it and was confused. But I would just jump on it because it fits into it, unless Lucia wants to ask herself, but it is, how do you perceive Laurel as a rather violent and warrior-like character? Do you perceive her as dad or something else?
Yeah, I something, and I'm sure a lot of this you've heard me say, but I do really think of all of my characters as entities that their hearts and their souls and their general kind of core is akin to mine, and then their external circumstances are what shape them into behaving differently than I do in my life. And so I found that Laurel does have a pure heart, and that her love for Vogue was very genuine and real. But I think that her culture, that the Klingon culture, does make her, certainly by human standards, more violent and definitely a warrior. And she was, definitely a warrior, and she was a commander. And even when she's in her copper dress, she knows how to fight like a warrior. So I definitely think she embraces that sort of mentality, and certainly embracing the Klingon honor code. And I believe that her standards are different from humans. And that was something I came back to a lot, is that I would notice people judging her on human standards, which is not wrong, but that's the whole gift of an alien creature, is you get to realize all of the assumptions you make about how we should behave because of the human culture that we live in. And so yes, I did see her as a more violent warrior than I certainly am as Mary, but I found that was because that's the culture that she's in. And I think as the story progresses, she learns that there's more than one way to be, whether it be from her relationship with Cornwell or the very complicated relationship with Tyler, and even Burnham's generosity, even though they don't get much time together, which is something that I do wish that Burnham and Laurel had more time to chat about that frickin' Ash Tyler guy. But even that moment of generosity, I think the more that she observes a different way of being, the more she would like to be a part of it. And that's why I think her journey in the second season is heartbreaking, in that she realizes that she has to give this up. Like, she doesn't get to just be a fun Federation gal. She has to do this for her empire. So she has to keep a certain toughness that she maybe would prefer not to have.
Yeah, and Lucio asked a question, noted that it's such a different depiction of a woman in the film industry, television, from what you expect. So
yes,
you can also jump in on this and talk about also, again, you just said, we're kind of confined to certain roles we're allowed to fill as women, and suddenly when you're a Klingon, you're allowed to do certain things you normally wouldn't do. And I know you've thought about this a lot as well, because why do we need to put on prosthetics and be a Klingon to be able to be, whatever Laurel was in all her glory, and why can't we be like this when we look the way you and I look right now?
Yeah. I completely agree. Yeah, and it came up. You were there on the cruise when I was fully Laurel, and people were asking me questions, and that is something that organically came out of Laurel's mouth, was why is it okay for me to be the way I am, covered in prosthetics and not out? And I think it's an excellent point, and I really have learned so much from that. And I've noted, I'm 6 feet tall. I have a deeper voice that I'm very proud of. It's resonant. It serves me quite well in my work. I'm athletic and, big boned, and I'm proud of that. And it is something that often in a certainly non-fiction or non-sci-fi certainly setting does get put in quite a box. And I have seen it change since I even started really auditioning. And I was lucky in school, pretty much from middle school onwards, when I really started doing plays and musicals, I was surrounded by teachers who didn't try and make me less than I was. I was always given strong roles, whether they be, often it was like the Baroness in Sound of Music, or Madame Dubonnet in The Boyfriend, or Queen Dionysa in Pericles. And then in college, everything from a female version of King Lear to a female version of Macbeth to Queen Elizabeth in Richard III. And then I love also the older female characters. Like I got to play Nat the grandma in Rabbit Hole, who's very much this quirky comic relief. But in doing that, and then heading into doing Macbeth was the next show, I was like, so interesting. Like, free. Like, I didn't have to worry about my aesthetic because she was frumpy and she had her funny hair, and I was so liberated because it was one less thing I had to worry about. And she's a truth teller. So often, you know, it's almost like a joke. Like, I know Meryl Streep played a bunch of older women in college as well. Like, when you have like an old soul and a sensibility and a truthfulness, often you get put in these roles because you can be your full self. And there's a wisdom there. And so I agree. My argument is, how can I, as, you know, a late 20s young woman, be all I am and play close to myself? Which, again, as an actor, is very scary to be, to just play close to yourself. I love doing extreme characters. So it's kind of a mixture for me, because if I kept doing characters like the Rel, I'd be thrilled. But I think there's more of a balance. And I jokingly say, in a very, very trite way, like, I want to be a female Kylo Ren, but just in the sense of like, we embrace someone like Adam Driver, who does not look like the norm, but has this, strong, big body, but is, I mean, I think he's quite handsome, but like not generic. And I think that we tend to embrace that far more in our male archetypes. And I want to be a part of that change. And I want to be able to champion characters, Laurel and beyond, who again embody different aesthetics, but are completely authentic in their expression and are accepted and aren't the punchline, which again was, Laurel was able to stand in her power and her sensuality in a way that we had not seen many female Klingons do in the past. That I was recently watching an episode with for Dr. Erin McDonald, her Trek brunch. Just with the Draw sisters, how it is this element of them being so sexual towards Picard, and like, it's how can we expand on that? And I also really think that obviously female sexuality and enjoyment of sex is something that is, often punished, whether it be overtly or covertly in our storytelling. And I think that is a huge shift that needs to happen as well. Is people don't even realize they're writing those tropes because they're so innate in our culture. So the more that we are able to be like, hey, you know what? You didn't really say that person got punished because they had sex, but you kind of did. So I want to be able to point it out when it's appropriate. I'm luckily surrounded by a lot of writers and artists who don't see things that way. The gift of this wild time is I've been able to read a lot more scripts and a lot more scripts of my peers who, like, something they'd always been wanting to write, or a pilot that they hadn't touched in a while. And I've been really humbled by the fact that the people in my life write women really well. And so I really, when it comes to making change, the vision I have, my prevision is that in 10 years time, I'll have a production company where I can be just championing that for myself and others. And it's not just because I want to have good roles to play. I want other women to have that opportunity as well.
Yeah, and I mean, the other issue that is connected to it is that the majority of stuff that's being written, whether it's film or television or stage, is written by men.
Yes.
And while there are men that do write women well, it's just, you will never have the multiplicity of voices. And again, also white men and straight men. So
yeah.
It's really a very niche part of society that writes most of the stories we see.
Yeah.
So that also plays a role. So it's obviously
absolutely
just get all the female voices behind the scene.
Yeah. Yes.
Because you can only do so much as an actress to material if that's what's on the page. Which also kind of ties in with the question that I actually have next, is like, how much influence do you have as an actress or what's on in the script, in the scene?
Yeah.
And I know quite often you don't really, but I also heard that at least Jason improvised quite a bit, but he also has more standing to do so, perhaps.
Yeah.
Being a straight white man, older, nobody loved him a lot, but it's a different situation.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. It is true. And that was, tying back to my fun anecdote with Jason, part of what I was nervous about too, because I have, even not being a newbie, there was a lot that I feel like in whatever next project I'm involved with of that kind of scale, I think I'll be a little more empowered to do stuff. Although I will talk to how I do think I was able to help shape stuff. But yeah, I was nervous because I was like, oh, what if Jason changes the line? Like, I want to be able to be on my game and like be able to come back at him with something. So for me, my journey with Trek, in past experiences, certainly in a lot of theater situations I've been in, workshopping plays, obviously when plays are already written and set, there you can be bold and make choices within the text, but not much when it comes to what's actually written. But I was involved with a few different workshops and stuff like that where, when it was appropriate, I could vocalize. And I feel like I'm pretty empowered to do that, and more so now with various groups I'm involved with. But with track, because obviously, like you said, like first big thing that I'm doing, I don't want to say anything that gets me fired. As I've talked to on other panels and stuff, you know, Laurel was not preordained to have any journey. Like I was initially kind of taken on as, oh, well, she's tall and she can do the language and it'd be great to have a female commander. And then as it became clear they needed someone to come up with the whole Tyler Vogt situation, they're like, oh, well, she seems like she can do it. And then episode 4 happened, the blessing of me being able to prove what I could do. And then things kind of got more set and evolved from there. So, but with that, every day felt like a test. And so I did not want to come in and be like, you know, I really don't. One phrase that my mom actually uses that I love is pushing your flowers through the cracks. Which is often what we have to do as artists, even in the best collaborative setting, because it's a collaborative art. You can't just come in and be like, this is how it's happening. And of course, you want to come in with a sense of humility. Like, you don't know everything that's right for you. Like, there's a possibility that the line isn't working for you because you haven't tapped into what part of the character that is coming from. So I always try and be diplomatic with myself too, and be like, okay, Mary, why don't you like this? Why are you uncomfortable? And so I would say mainly, certainly with episode 4, while I do believe that what Shahzad and I found did inform the rest of the journey for them, like it really came out of a combination of Tunde, our director, when I'm convincing him to go over to the sarcophagus ship, he said, we had just gotten more durable or flexible hands that were more fitted to in the first 2 episodes, I had like these giant sausage fingers. It was really fun. But I got a little bit more flexible fingers, and Tunde said, like, flirt with him a little bit. Like, let this scene be a little more flirty. And I was like, okay. And I placed my hand on his chest, and then everything kind of escalated from there. And that's the day that I went home after filming and like started crying. Like, I took a hot shower, and it's like overwhelming because you've just done a full day of work. And I was like, oh my God, like she loves him. And I like had a sense of where the story was headed. And I was like, I don't think it's going to work out for Laurel, at least romantically. So that was a moment. And it really did. That was whatever they were seeing in the dailies and what we were playing with. And then we did the dilithium processor scene, which was the last day of filming for that episode. I feel like that really sealed the deal because Tunde like had us go full throttle flirting. Like, we want to make it clear visually that these two, something's up. So that was a moment where I felt if I hadn't been willing, if Shahzad and I hadn't taken the extra time to work those scenes on our own time, that might not have happened. Aside from that, there was, when it came to actually asking about a line change or just making sure that we were doing the scene justice, was the scene in Despite Yourself, episode 10, that Jonathan Frakes directed. And Sean Cochran, who wrote that episode, is like one of the most lovely, wonderful humans, and super enthusiastic. So when we got that scene, you know, it's very intense. And at that point, the audience doesn't know the full situation between these two characters. And so while we understood that it was coming from a real place for both of them, we also knew how it could come off, and we wanted it to strike the right balance. And there were a few lines, I don't even remember them now, that we felt went too far in a direction that didn't feel to coincide with the integrity of the characters. Pretty far in that scene. So, and I remember Shahzad and I chatted about it. Sonequa actually happened to be in the trailer when we were talking about it. And the three of us wanted to make sure that this, whatever was going on with the 3 characters, was given the most respect and integrity as possible, even though we knew we were playing with people's minds without, you know, the full reveal. So I remember very diplomatically, we chatted with Sean and we were able to work things out, and with Jonathan. And on the day, I mean, I do say that was maybe my favorite day of filming on the whole show, just because Jonathan is such a delight and so enthusiastic. And Shahzad and I had really worked, again, extra time. I just was so lucky that Shahzad was willing to work on scenes outside of the day, because I think we just benefited so much from having that level of trust and commitment, because they're very intense scenes. So I am proud of that, because I felt that while it's, again, still a pretty edgy, intense scene, we were able to find a middle ground that was felt right to all parties. And then other than that, mainly I think I'd like to think that my presence on social media and with the fans at conventions, both as the first season was unfolding, because everything was coming out, like we were still filming while the convention stuff started happening promotion wise. I'd like to think that the way I was talking about the Klingons and the passion that I had, encouraged everyone to give that level of integrity to Laurel. I would like to believe that they would have done that anyway, but that feels to me like the best we can do as actors is make it clear that we do care about the character and fully commit, and then hopefully people will respect that and follow suit.
Yeah, and I think that's also kind of a key difference. First of all, television and film, in terms of television, you often get directors in that have never worked on the show
Right.
or on the franchise. So you as an actor probably have a better idea where everything is going than that director that might just do 1 week.
Yeah.
I've heard from other actors as well. And the other thing is, I think that the industry has changed, that it seems to be more collaborative now than it used to. Like, even talking to people who were in like Star Trek Voyager, who said they never had other writers. Like the writers were somewhere else. They're not so they wouldn't even really have had that chance to, like, other than apparently Bob Picardo, who always just annoyed everybody into doing things for him. But I think actors wouldn't have dared as well because they were young. It seems to have shifted a bit more towards it being a collaborative process. I don't know if that's for every production set you've been on, but
yeah, I do feel that it's more of like, from what I've heard, and certainly, yeah, I mean, I grew up on sets more or less, and I think it does vary, the difference between film and TV for sure. And it does seem to me, when I would, there's stuff that I was taking for granted because it was my only experience. And then I'd say to my mom, oh yeah, well, I was talking to so-and-so, the writer. She's like, oh wow, really? They were on set? So I do think that, we're realizing more and more, I think overall, that the more collaborative and the more of an actual family we build, the better the art's going to be. Because, I mean, not to say that what came before wasn't great, but I think why not have that conversation? Because that's the whole point, is that we're a community telling a story. So I really loved, because no matter what, there was always a writer on set. In my time on Discovery, was they were there, and usually it was whoever penned the episode, but sometimes, for scheduling they couldn't do that, but they always made sure that there was someone who was like, had the writer's room in mind, and would be able to be that direct, communication with who was ever show running at the time or whatnot. And I thought we really did benefit from that. So I hope that it continues to be that way.
Yeah, I think we can kind of segue and talk a little bit about you existing as a person on social media as an actress, because there were some questions coming up, like, how do you deal with fame? And probably also in that connection, how do you present yourself on social media? Like, do you think it's a second performance, or even having a conversation like this now? I mean, you exist in public, and we all know that on social media, even if you're not famous, you're different on social media than you are, but you have to tread even more carefully. And then as a woman, again, you have to present yourself to the outside world. So yeah, how has that experience been for you? And I mean, not like, you probably get recognized less than others because but yeah, and before you answer, because I noticed the difference is so striking, because by now we went to Disneyland together, so we existed in a public space where you wouldn't get recognized, because I mean, it was also earlier on the show, but you're because of the prosthetics. But then in a convention setting,
Yes.
Everybody actually knows who you are, and
Yeah.
every 2 minutes,
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
will you, and they're nice and everything, but you have to be on all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you note that, because I agree. It is, I have been able to experience fame in a very like specified way, because yes, when I'm at the conventions, and I think now too, because I'll talk about, like, I have built a reputation of being accessible and goofy and wanting to engage. So I think within the Trek community, the people that know that they can come up and that I will, have a conversation. So that's been really wonderful. And the moments where I've had like a handful of times where I've been in like a coffee shop and my barista's like, my favorite one was after the season 2 finale. He's like, are you the Chancellor? And he's like, yeah, you just like totally came in on that cruise ship. And I was like, yeah. I did. So that was a thrill. So for me, it's like when it does happen in the real world, it's like such a thrill. I find that it's like a mixture. So yeah, conventions is definitely the most amount of, recognition. Handful here and there of people where it's completely out of the blue, and then a lovely amount of people that are either in circles that I'm a part of that, we're chatting about one thing or a theater group, and then it's, they say, oh, and by the way, I actually really love your work on Discovery. So I have been able to enjoy that, and it's not something that I'm annoyed by, certainly. And I mean, I just actually on social media reposted today this artist checklist that I came up with, which I always have the preamble of like, when I say artists, I believe we're all artists. We're all creatively minded and we're all creatively finding ways to exist. So that's the one thing about that checklist that I'm always like, I'm not saying that this is artist is this and you're this. I'm saying we're all artists. But one of the things I say is never apologize, or don't apologize for your enthusiasm, which is something that, because I've been in environments mainly that have encouraged my enthusiasm, but I still live in society. So there are obviously people that when they see that level of enthusiasm are like, okay, buddy. And while I can't just be like, screw you, I hope I can be that beacon of encouragement for others, because I think enthusiasm comes from passion, and why would we want to squelch that? I was a geeky, nerdy kid who loved franchises, like you said, Harry Potter was definitely a big one for me, and loved stories, and I wanted the people involved with those stories to be excited about it too. And so since I can be that in any capacity for Trek right now, and hopefully other things in the future, like, why not? All that being said, it is obviously, no matter what, it is a level of persona. Who I am when I get up in the morning and I'm tired and I haven't had my coffee is definitely not the exact person that's talking right now. But I do try and let this vector of me, that when I'm in an interview like this or on social media, to be an authentic vector. It's like the best version of myself I can be. If anything, it's like who I aspire to be. I hope to be this level of Mary all the time. But also I have been parallel to my public account. I have a separate public account. We used to play Dress Up, which is a self-portrait series I started about 4 years ago. And that is not a private account. Like anyone can follow it. And I posted about it recently because I realized the 4-year anniversary. I was like, wow. But it has become this sort of celebration of loneliness and of the moments of darkness and frustration, and sometimes moments of levity. 16 pages. So I want to be able to acknowledge that I am all of that enthusiasm and excitement, but I still have dark days or dark moments. And obviously there's still so much progress to be made when it comes to being a woman in this industry. So I do get frustrated about that stuff quite often, whether I see it affecting someone else or affecting myself directly. I try and let that fire fuel me as opposed to just burn me down and make me mad. But there's some days where I just want to sit in the anger and be like, you know what? But yeah, so I think there's a way to use social media for good. And certainly now it is a huge source of connection. And I've found that just doing some of these live streams on Instagram or just and getting to do interviews like this and like just being able to be present. And like, if this makes an hour of someone's day better, what a gift. What a gift. Like, I just want to celebrate. I just am, as much as I'm scared and nervous about everything in the future, I have been filled with a lot of gratitude for any level of presence I can have and how that can help others. So I'm trying to live in that. And again, it fluctuates from day to day. But yeah, I think I'm not into the too cool for school mentality, whether it be, and I mean, I say this because I am not that way, but like, I think it comes from the same maybe fear or nervousness I have, but I choose to be brave as opposed to just be like, whatever. Like, I can't. I've never been that way. I've always envied people that can be that way sometimes, but at the end of the day, I'm so glad I pick passion over neutrality.
So yeah, and I mean, so the next question kind of, it would apply to social media, I'm sure, as well, but also being just existing in the industry, also going to conventions. Just, have you noticed that maybe you get different questions or different treatment just based on the fact that you're a woman? And I know this question came from a student of mine who had watched a video about how actresses get all of these questions that actors would never get asked, like, how do you do your hair, like, where did you buy your clothes, blah blah, blah. Things like that, or even more sexist, overtly sexist stuff, obviously, but it's also these kind of microaggressions almost that just happen because you're a woman. So like, how have you experienced this? How do you deal with this?
Yeah, I am really glad that this has come up, that we're talking about it, because I think we're in a very interesting time where certain things still exist. But we are more cognizant of what has come before, and like, we're having these conversations, and there are more women who will be like, hey, eyes up here, buddy, or like, why are you asking me about this designer or whatever. But I think it still very much exists. And what I'm finding is that people maybe won't articulate why they won't hire you because they know they'll get in trouble, but they still won't hire you. Like, no one's going to say, hey, so you're 6 feet and you're not like anorexic, so we're not going to give you this part because we just can't imagine someone like you having a romantic interest. Like, no one's going to call up and say that. Whereas in the past, they might have done that. Like, they might have just said, you're too fat, or, something terrible. And so I find it an interesting time because we're pointing it out more, which is making more people make smarter decisions. But I think that it allows for microaggressions to exist in a lot more subtle ways. So it's there. The thing about microaggressions, which I'm obsessed with, because it is harder to point them out, depending on what it is, and what the room that you're in is. But I do think that they're just as aggressive, if not more so, because they pile up. And for me, again, I talk about my height a lot because it is a defining factor for me, whether or not it should be. I'm proud of my height. I'm glad I'm tall. I was joking, actually. I haven't had someone tell me I'm tall in over 2 months because I've been on Zoom. And I was like, this is the first time I haven't met a new person. And they've been like, oh, wow. And I find that it's not a microaggression when people say that, but it kind of is. Like, on the scale of microaggressions, it's like really not a problem because people associate height with power and strength, and like, often it comes from a place of like, oh, I wish I were tall. So I respect that. And like, it is, the fact that this is my cross to bear is very, very silly. But, I do think it's a way, also because I have a lot of energy. Like, there are tall people that are kind of very reserved, and I am both big energy and big body. And so I think it's a way of people saying like, oh, you're a lot, without saying, oh, you're a lot. And I do, you see me at conventions, I wear my big boots or my heels, and because I like the way my thighs look when, and they're like combat boots that are like very sturdy, but like, I don't want to sacrifice my aesthetic and what I love because somebody's uncomfortable. And again, it's not like I'm doing something very like crude or rude. I'm literally wearing boots because they're awesome. But I do think that that's a factor. I've definitely, you know, had a few auditions where I've come in and the first thing they say is, "Oh, yeah, you're tall." And I'm like, really? One in particular, I remember it was one where it was a romantic, like I was just supposed to be the girl on the date or whatever. And I specifically made the choice. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to wear flats. Like if I were on a date, I'd probably wear heels, but like just for the sake of everyone's comfortability, I'm going to wear flats. And even so, that was the first thing that was said when I walked in the room. "Oh, you're tall." And then it totally threw me off for the whole audition. I don't even know if I acted well because I was just like, oh, they're not going to cast me. So all that being said, something I've actually been really working on personally in my just artistic work these past few weeks, this past month, I took a self-tape class from Risa Brayman Garcia's BGB studio, which is here in LA, and they're doing a lot of Zoom classes and really trying to be present with actors in this time. And I really appreciate it. I'm going to take some more classes there in the future. But something that really came up in that class was I was so defensive of letting my heart be seen again because I had felt that it was not being appreciated and seen. Like there were so many auditions I'd gone to where I had done good work and I knew that the second I walked in, the way my face looked was the reason why I wasn't getting cast. And I'm a Scorpio with my moon in Aries. And so I get really protective of my heart. And I was giving 10% less than I knew I could, if not more so, in any given audition. Technically, I would execute it well. I'd be the right character. I'd probably get emotional. But there was that little extra bit of just giving myself that I wasn't doing because I was like, why should I give that to you if you're just going to reject me? And the thing that I really broke through in this class was like Risa, who is a wonderful casting director who really does believe in the work, was just like, go there, and had me go there in class. And it was vulnerable and scary, but I was like, right, at least I can walk away knowing that I did good work and that someday someone's going to remember that I gave my full self and they will make that choice. And so often it's not even the casting directors, it's the producers ahead of them who have a certain idea of what a woman should be like. You know, there are so many wonderful casting directors who do want to make bold, interesting choices, but there are so many other, you know, different hierarchies and so much about the representation. I agree again, like the mentorship as well. If we have a bunch of cis, white, straight men at the top always, that next level of ascension is never going to happen in the storytelling. And it is shifting. We're seeing more of that happening where people from different walks of life, whether it be gender orientation or anything in between, race, are ascending and are continue, you know, hopefully empowering those below them. And representation creates actualization, one of my favorite Sonequa quotes. And so I do have faith in it. And like I said, I'm empowered. Like I really do have this 10-year goal of in 10 years time, I'll be like, there it is. There's my production company. Here I am empowering all these incredible artists I know who want to tell interesting stories from their own perspective. So very convoluted, long-winded answer because it is so gray right now. It's not as, but I just think it's important to acknowledge that there's still a long way to go because we have to keep pushing for more. And again, because of these writers that I know who, whether it be Christine Boylan, who wrote this wonderful two-hander analog that hopefully we'll do some sort of Zoom reading for in the near future. The character I get to play in that is this engineer set in a dystopian future. She's flawed and does some pretty crazy things, but like she's wonderful. Like she is what I want out of a flawed female character. It's written by a woman. She gets it. She gets this level of nuance that certainly fuels me. And I agree that I'm not saying that men can't write good female roles, but I certainly think we should give women the opportunity to write female roles as well.
Yeah. And I mean, it's always kind of striking because we're like, oh, well, you know, the film industry or whatever, it seems so far removed sometimes from what we do. And at the same time, it seems like the problem is everywhere. And I mean, particularly looking at academia, we have so many similar problems of like, who is actually in charge, aka who's professorships. There's so much diversity in terms of who's, even if we're getting to a point where it's really diverse who's writing dissertations, and is like, or it's just doing a BA, MA, just exists in the system. But then you look up top and it's all cis, white, straight men everywhere. And I mean, there may be a generational shift coming soon, but it's still like, we all exist in these structures where it's still like this. It limits us severely and affects how we perform in our daily lives, I think. So but also speaking to the hierarchy thing, so you just directed in New York City. So I wanted you to talk about this as well, because it is still different. Also, like, how do you exist as a female director on set, because you're suddenly the boss, you're suddenly in charge, and we all know that it's different sometimes to strike that balance between, like, if a woman like acts her power, you're suddenly like bossy, or you know, how was that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been so lucky because my best friend from high school, Remy, Remington Moses, is a wonderful, wonderful actor. And she was at NYU when I was at Juilliard. And so we spent a lot of time in the city together, and we were just the biggest theater geeks in high school together. And so she was involved with this play that I just directed in New York, Closed Circuit. And it was a new piece that she was developing with two other guys. They all had written their own monologues based on the same central story, and were literally putting it together, you know, rearranging, deciding how the story fit, and then had me come in and help with the shaping on the page, and then ultimately, obviously, the shaping on the stage. And what I'm grateful for, I've just been working with Remy again on a Zoom reading project that hopefully we'll be able to do a public presentation of at some point. But it's been really exciting to explore the Zoom space and what it's capable of. I think there's actually a lot of potential, and we're going to have to figure it out, because it is going to be a form of performance for a while now. Like, even best case scenario, that's going to be a way in which we get to experience theater. But in working on the play in person as well, what I really appreciate about working with Remy, she's also a director in her own right, and she has been encouraging me to step into my power more. Like particularly in the Zoom process, it's all just crazy town, and I'm just like, okay, well, let's get together. And I definitely, when I get in there, I'm a very actor's director. Like, I love talking about the ideas, but not pushing too hard on, do this moment like this. I like to give the actors space to find the piece. And then as we get closer to more of a finished product, be a little bit sharper. But I have found that leading with enthusiasm, as I do, is the best way, because I think it encourages others to do their best work. Like, that, it's that right level of enthusiasm with a sharpness that you know what you're doing. It's not just me like, it's great, it's great, it's great. It's clear I've come in and done my homework. I understand, I have done my research, whether it be the history of something or that I know the characters. So I think leading by example is a huge part of directing. If you walk in feeling, exuding, great, here we are to collaborate, but I also know my shit. I do. So again, my experience so far directorially has been in really great spaces where I am completely respected. But and to these men's credit, in Closed Circuit, it was Remy and two guys, cis white guys, great writers and actors, and they totally respected me. And I think because, again, Aaron, one of them, said to me near the end of the process, he's like, you're such a good sneaky director, because you say things like, well, I really want you to lean towards this, when you're really just saying, like, no, you're lying. And I mean, like, I feel, certainly having been in the actor position so often, the way you want to be told things, like you don't want to be told things that you know. You're like, if you know you're messing up on your lines, you don't really need someone to like say it to you unless you continue to not know your lines. Like if it's a day where you're a little off and someone gives you like, okay, well, I think you're still finding it, then you're like, I know, I'm going to go home and do my homework. But if someone's constantly pointing out what you're doing wrong, it puts you in a defensive place. So what I'm discovering with directing is the more I come in with just like, this is what's working, here's where we want to fine tune more, and then I just say the things I want to hear. The reminders, I think reminders are for, you know, for skilled actors, like we all get the sort of what are your wants and your needs and what are the tactics that you're using in the scene to get what you want. Like this is like basic stuff that we chat about in any given scene class or drama class. But I know for me, it's something that I read a script and be like, oh, well, this is fun. And I don't go, well, what do I want in this scene? So what I found is that certainly in working on plays, because they're so innately, they cater to that sort of structure. Just being like, just remember, guys, you don't have to tell me, it's not a homework assignment, but like, remember what you're going after. And just remember, you're always striving for that. And this class I just took, that was another huge part about what Risa was saying was, we want to see you affecting your scene partner and see how they are affecting you. That's the most exciting thing, is when someone's being present and active without showing. You know, it's not like, ah. So luckily, I can mainly talk about what I've enjoyed about directing because I've done it in great environments. But obviously, I am very aware of the fact that it's something that most female directors, and certainly I think in film and television, because we are still living in a very, like, most crews are primarily male. Obviously, there are big shifts happening. I know, you know, Jenny Erman, who was the showrunner for Jane the Virgin, made sure that, I believe it was like over 80% of their directors were women, and making sure that the crews overall are as diverse as possible, again, with gender, race, orientation. So there are champions that are trying to shift it. And I think that women are naturally excellent directors. We're multitaskers. I mean, again, I hate to fall into any generalizations because, you know, as we know, everything is so much on a spectrum. And I think the more we celebrate that and acknowledge that, the better. But many women I know have a certain way of thinking that is excellent for directing, that gets multiple things done at once, who are able to balance the tech with the emotion. And I've seen it in action, and I hope that we just see more women getting those opportunities, which again, like if those opportunities are coming out of it being popular, who cares? Because if the women get the job and they show up and they do good work, they're going to continue to show up and do good work and be employed by other people. So I just really think that the more, and it's not about completely eliminating the men also, because it's about having a crew that is able to be like, oh, if we have a bunch of everybody, if we have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, we're just going to have an overall happier set and more collaborative set, and we get all these different perspectives. So it's not, you know, for me, I've always said feminism isn't about pushing people away. It's about bringing us all together and letting us all celebrate masculinity and femininity, that we are allowed to have both of those things inside of us always. And the more that feminism allows men to be in touch with their emotions, if they feel like they can't be, the better. So, yeah. I feel strongly about these things.
I think that sums it up pretty well. And again, it's something that just extends to basically every part of life and every profession as well. And yeah. And so we have, I think, like 15 minutes left. So maybe 2 or 3 questions, probably not more. But if somebody has something, type it in this chat window, and then we try to actually get you on camera to ask as well. So basically just virtually raise your hand in the chat window. Tell me what you want to ask. Now is the time. We should play in like a Jeopardy theme.
Yeah. Well, I've got, of course, conveniently, I have John Slow the Round.
Very good, very good.
I am a Klingon. This is actually one of my favorite. This from Starbase Indy, one of the smaller conventions I went to. They had the Klingon Language Institute had their big party, and they had one of these, and they were like, "Do you want to keep it?" And I was like, "Yes."
We just get a lull at the little.
What?
There we are. Ashumi, do you want to turn yourself on and just ask that yourself? Are you here?
Yeah. Hi.
Hey.
So I really liked your anecdote about the session you had with the mask and everything, and how you kind of incorporated that into your acting with Star Trek. And I just wanted to ask if there's anything from your time at acting school or that stayed with you, like an assignment or any kind of class or a teacher or something of this sort.
Great. Love that. A lot of different things stuck with me for sure. I mean, number one, that I made, some of my best friends still are from my class. And so that number one is a real gift. The mask work was a big takeaway, definitely. The creature work. I'm trying to think. Well, I think in line with so much of what we've been talking about, like I said, I was encouraged from day one to not apologize. I had done my best. Like, again, I never could fully hide. Like my enthusiasm was just too much a part of me. But of course I still was in high school, and that's brutal. And I was tall and, all these things. And so and growing up in the Valley in LA, like, trying to be all whatever, even though I really tried not to be a Valley girl, I was still in that culture. Right. And so from practically day one in my voice and speech classes, I would say very intelligent things and then be like, well, I don't know, or sorry, or, just any sort of preamble or whatever to water down what I was saying. And all of my voice and speech teachers, I feel like they probably convened and were like, we need to get Mary to not do that. But they would call me on it. And beyond just voice and speech, in class, my teachers and my classmates, to their credit, would encourage me to just say what I meant. And that then was reflected in the roles I was cast in, because particularly in the first 2 years of Juilliard, they give you roles that stretch you, whether it be actually stretch you in a way that you really is perfect for you, or just give you something crazy to do because why not? And so in my second year in the Shakespeare slot, they did cast me as the second half of King Lear as a woman, which fun anecdote there is, so Noah Averbach-Katz, who is now married to Mary Wiseman, all three of us were in class together.
Right.
So that's another crazy thing from my Juilliard experience. But so Noah is also very tall. He's 6'3", and he played Lear in the first half. And then when the storm happens and the madness comes in, I came in as like this primordial goddess, like with my hair. It was the last time my hair was this long, and like carrying a tree, because there had been Hurricane Sandy recently, and they had found this big branch basically that was basically a tree, and we had like pulled it up the freight elevator, and I like pulled it in. It's just a rehearsal project in a room with fluorescent lights, but we really just went for it. And I had to drop into my power. And my classmate Rob, who's from Hull, Northern England, has a great, accent. And he would just say to me, he's like, "You're a beast, Maza, be a beast." And I tried. And definitely that project was a big shift, because it also, when it came to my work as an artist and an actor, I was like, this is an amazing opportunity. Like, what woman gets to play King Lear at this point in her life? It's gonna be the greatest thing that ever has happened. And of course, we had like 4 weeks to rehearse, and it's a very complicated role for even someone who's appropriately cast. And while I'm ultimately proud of my performance, the first night where we had invited dress, which was basically having classmates and teachers and my parents, and it just wasn't, I hadn't dropped in, and I just started beating myself up so much. Like, I just was like, that's it, I'm worthless. Like, no one will like me because I didn't do a perfect job. And while I kind of knew that was wrong, there's still a huge part of me that was defining myself by what I did and not who I was. Mm-hmm. And I think in high school, that was a way also of protecting myself, because I was like, well, I've got this weird personality, but I get really good grades and I do the shows and I'm accomplished. And while I do love learning and reading, and I never didn't like the things I was being an overachiever for, but my overachievement definitely comes out of the fact that I'm like, please like me. And so I had to have this moment where luckily I had 2 more performances and I had to just let it all go and just be like, screw it. I'm just going to be present. And I'm so much prouder of my work in those next 2 shows. And that was right at the end of the semester. So I got to go home. It was a real shift. I had some personal stuff with, boy stuff, but anyway, and it was just like a big cathartic shift for me. I remember that was when I really got into yoga, and like it really just fueled me for the rest of my time at school. There were plenty of difficult moments after that, but Lear was like a turning point, and that's why they give their students crazy roles like that, because you can't not have an experience and learn from it. And while I still struggle with holding myself to too high of a standard, or holding myself to a high standard, but then I think you have to always hold yourself to a higher standard, but then be okay if you don't quite get to it. Right. Knowing that isn't, and it's different from what I was saying before about purposefully 10% extra. It's like, always be reaching up. And one of our movement teachers, Moni, who's been there from the beginning, who's this amazing, like everything you want out of a drama movement teacher sort of persona. One of the things we do is this, but you're on your toes and you're reaching up like this. Mm-hmm. And you switch from side to side, and he says, reach for the ceiling, touch the ceiling. Why aren't you touching it? And I'm like, hey, you can't. And that's the whole point, is that you're always striving. So that is a really big takeaway, is like always striving. Yeah.
The experience kind of made you more forgiving towards yourself. Okay.
Yes. It definitely, it made me realize I should be. And then, so on the days where I'm not, I have to come back to like, Mary, truly be okay. And I think definitely I'm much more comfortable with just being me as me. Still working on it, but in knowing that if I didn't accomplish anything today, whatever that means, I'm still okay. Right. And so I certainly embrace that mentality more. And I do think that the gift of an intense training program like that is you're so in it for 4 years that you can't help but learn. And it keeps reverberating. Like I've been out of there for almost 5 years now, and there's still so much I reflect upon. And yeah.
Right.
Thank you for that question.
Sure.
We have 3 more lined up, and we're probably trying to get through these, and then that's
okay, great.
Vincent, do you want to ask your question? There's Vincent. Do you want to turn on the? There you are.
Hello.
Hello, Sabrina. Hello, Mary. We appear to be on the Enterprise right now, which I guess is
very nice.
So yes, my question is. Firstly, thank you so much for coming along to do this. This has been really fascinating. And now my question is, Star Trek has a history of discussing and engaging with social issues. It's been called the official American metaphor, even. Mm-hmm. What are the particular issues that you think Discovery specifically has engaged with in interesting ways?
I'll start with the one that was my primary focus as Laurel, which something that we touched upon was I felt we were able to use the Klingon species as a way to explore some themes that were, again, pretty much in vein with everything we've talked about. Like, we are not at the Federation level of equality, so we were able to utilize the Klingon plot to explore a lot when it came to patriarchal ideals and women struggling within it. So I was grateful for that. I thought overall, just what it means, so much of Burnham's journey is about the choices we make, and when do you stick to your instincts, and when do you and I mean, it is a recurring Trek motif that we see pretty much throughout the series. But I think when it comes to looking at what Burnham does, she's so headstrong and sacrificial and willing to give her full self to the cause. So I think it's a real exploration of that and the repercussions of that. And I think probably more and more so the trauma that comes from putting yourself in such extreme situations. But yeah, I mean, I think there's also, we get great with all of the Kelpian stuff. We get so much about Saru's journey in being other, and what does it mean to be the one that left, and how do you come back? I really appreciated particularly how that was really expanded upon in the second season with Saru. That was one of my favorite explorations in that season. And I think overall, yeah, what it means to be a member of Starfleet, or to be a member of something that you believe in, you know, so much of Pike's journey as well is, what does it mean? What is the ultimate sacrifice? What lengths are we willing to go for the larger whole? And that really does culminate for everyone in the finale of the second season with, you know, and even Laurel, she's like, you know, I'll show up. When it comes to the saving of all sentient life in the galaxy, I think this is worth teaming up to do. So that's what I hope is certainly a large part of the story is how we will come together in the times that we need to, which again, it was also a theme in the first season. And again, with the Klingon storyline, with the Federation, is when do we come together? What does a true leader look like? And what kind of compromises are we willing to make for the greater whole?
Thank you.
Thanks.
We have Verena, who says the question might be really random, but I think it's still a fun one.
Great.
How are you, Verena? Hopefully it works. Yes.
Hi.
Hey.
So you mentioned that you like Harry Potter, so I wondered your Hogwarts houses and what house you would sort. I think, can you hear me?
Yeah, that was really bad.
But I think I got it. What Hogwarts house would I be in, and what house would Laurel be in? Yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
So this is great because I always say I am in Gryffindor, at least when I've taken the test, but I'm a secret Slytherin, and Laurel is a Slytherin. I feel like a lot of my characters veer more towards Slytherin in the fun, cunning way. There's an aspect of that I really admire, but don't fully embody in my own life. I try and be as brave as possible, and I do think, I mean, I joke about being a Scorpio, but with this Aries moon, but I really feel that that's very defining for me, that there is this like Gryffindor in me, but the Slytherin lives there too. Very Harry Potter situation. So that's my little anecdote there. I like that question. Harry Potter questions always welcome.
Sia has a good speech about dialect and speech code.
Oh yeah.
So, which will probably also finally let you talk Klingon for a bit. But
yes, gotta do it.
Jump in.
So I hope it works.
Yeah.
Would you say that the character, or especially dialect and speech training that you got during acting classes and on set, that just helps you to understand a person on set, and generally person like fictitious and real life persons better? Or would you say that speech is not what really makes us with our culture and all that we are?
Yeah, I love that. I do. And yeah, you've definitely asked the right person, because I really am obsessed with dialects and accents. And that was something I really gravitated towards in school. And I had a few different projects where I had to really dive into an accent. My favorite was Dancing at Lunasa, where I was doing Northern Irish, 1939, Five Irish Sisters. It's one of my favorite plays, gorgeous. And I spent that rehearsal process with these great dialect tapes at Gillian Lane Plesha, where they have like changeovers where they say specific sounds that are different from the standard American and that, but then she goes and interviews or just chats with people, women from those areas, and just has them talk about making tea or whatever. And I would just go to sleep with those every night. And I really believe that dialect and accents, it's not this separate entity. It is culture. And I think that, you know, colloquialisms and inflections and everything, they do inform character. And while I think, like with anything in life, we aren't defined by one certain aspect, what I've found is that once I get the rhythm of the character, I'm able to trust myself so much more, which is certainly where I am with Laurel at this point. Is like I worked so much on what that dialect was for her, based off of what the language was for her initially, that at this point I would get a script and just be like, oh, right, that's how she would do it. And just like little things like she doesn't do any elisions. Like if they accidentally put like a can't, I would say cannot. Like that was just like, these are little things that help me feel in line with who she is. So while I think we are shaped by our culture, we can expand past it. I do think it's a really great key in, certainly for me, into who the character is and how they feel. And I mean, I could go on about like with inflections, like working on Irish and then looking at Southern dialects, and looking at British dialects, because we know that that is so much of how that accent started to develop was because of who was coming over at that time and who was settling in those areas. You can see how certain inflections or things stayed and what didn't. And I think it's just very informative about who these people are and how they say things. Like my favorite parallel with Irish and Southern is the upward inflection, the way in which like an Irish lady might say, oh, well, she's not very pretty, is she? And like a Southern person may be like, well, she's not really pretty, is she? Like it's kind of that like way of nicely saying something that's really not very nice. And so I think it's fun to play with. I think with anything you then have to go deeper and not just do the external, but I tend to like to see how shapes and sounds inform who a character is.
We had one more question. I think we can probably take it, and it's a kind of a nice wrap up to come back to Star Trek.
Great.
And it's Franz. You want to jump in and ask your question?
Okay. Can you read me?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, that's very nice. That's the question. For to say, I'm a huge Trekkie, more of an old school Trekkie.
Mm-hmm.
And several years ago, I read a certain interview with Diana Muldaur. Maybe you know her. She played Pulaski. I really loved her role.
Oh,
and,
yes, yeah.
She's one of my favorite. And the problem with her was that when she was talking about the crews from the original series and the Next Generation, she said that she was very, very disappointed that some crew members kind of lost the intention of Gene Roddenberry. And since you and I also, we're far too young to ever met him in person since he died close to 30 years ago, I wanted to know, how do you feel that in the crew? Do you say all of you people are like Trekkies? Trekkies yourself? Would you consider yourself a Trekkie?
Yes, and yeah, so yeah, just like the whole like the kind of core Discovery cast for sure. That's something that I love about the Discovery crew is that it varies. You know, Anthony definitely is the most genuine, like Trekkie. Like he knows it definitely the best. I'd like to think of myself as a strong second, but it came out of the fact that I went and watched all the stuff. But other than that, just celebrating enthusiasm. That is a defining characteristic of the Discovery cast that I'm so grateful that was the cast that I was with, because Sonequa is such a champion of the ensemble. And I've talked about this so often, but like she from day one was, you know, calling us family. She would, despite the fact that she was in pretty much every scene, having to like give her heart and soul, was making sure we would have game nights every few weeks or a dinner and birthday celebrations, and like came and checked on me at certain points in the filming process in the first season. Like we didn't interact much, so she would just kind of like pop in and be like, hey, here's going well. And so that's really that she set that standard, and the whole rest of the cast followed suit, and crew, literal crew, behind the scenes. And I think it was because we were all those type of people that would follow suit. So it was a perfect kind of storm in that regard. But I will always give due credit to Sonequa, because easily, if she had had a different attitude, we all would have kind of, you know, created our own little separate groups. And certainly on the Klingon side, because again, we had our little Klingon crew, And we could have just felt completely in a different story without anything. And I felt so much a part of the full ensemble, and it empowered me to do my best work, because I was like, oh, well, I want to do good for Sonequa and for myself. But it allowed me to come back to not just, oh, I want to do good work for me. It was about, I want to do good work because this is an ensemble and we're telling an exciting story. So yes, I would say absolutely. I think the Discovery cast is a unique breed, and I'm grateful to have been a part of it.
So yeah, thanks again so much for your time and for having such a lovely conversation with us. I hope you also enjoyed joining us today. We recorded everything. We're trying to make this available. I mean, obviously everybody that was here now, I think, will probably not listen to it again or watch it again, but hopefully some others that couldn't join us today. And yeah, I hang in there over there in LA, also in downtown. We have a weird time.
It's a weird time, but
it's a good thing that we can have, I think, this kind of connection anyway.
Yes, definitely.
We all could have it tonight, so.
Yeah, well, I'm so grateful that you asked, and I'm excited for all that you're doing, and excited to just keep trying to figure it all out together. And you know,
if that isn't the most Star Trek thing, just trying to figure it all out together.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely.
All right.
Cool.
Bye.
Well, thank you. I'll disappear. Okay, bye. Thank you all so much for listening. Kapla! All right, I didn't say any Klingon. Klingon mach, tach, judge. Okay, phew. Couldn't leave without doing that. Okay, bye, Sabrina. Thank you again.